Before this video probably starts, we're going to go through a note that we actually went through yesterday. The layoffs, unfortunately, have got worse. We talked about Supermassive in yesterday's video, and today, unfortunately, moments after that video went live, we got news that London studios, Firesprite, and Sony overall in the UK are closing down divisions and firing lots of people, letting them go. Again, if you see them on Twitter, kind of promoting themselves for a new job and looking for new work, just give them a retweet and a like for visibility because it'll help them a great deal. And again, my heart goes out to everybody, especially at London studios who, if you didn't know, were behind some of the best PSVR games like Blood and Truth. This means we're never going to get a sequel, at least not by them, which fucking sucks. But what sucks more is that the people there have lost their jobs completely. So yeah, if you see them around looking for work, give them a like, give them a retweet. It sucks I keep having to bring this up every video, but I just want to make you guys aware if you do see them. So anyway, with that being said, on to today's topic. One of the games that I was very much looking forward to back in October was the Foglands, a roguelike Western supernatural game that made its way onto PSVR2 and PS5 as a flat-screen VR game hybrid, and I found that very, very exciting as a prospect, and unfortunately it came out and was plagued with a plethora of issues. Most notably, there are only 3 levels to go through. Picking up items and using them was really janky. You could only hold down the analog stick to run, meaning that you get tired very easily. NPC dialogue was too long and held you up in places where you really thought you should be getting going in the flow of gameplay. The visual quality wasn't amazing, and the game was full of game-breaking bugs. But since then, there's been a lot of improvements in terms of what the devs have done with upgrading the game and updating it and taking on player feedback. So I actually got access to this game just last week, and I've been playing through it for the last couple of days just to get my impressions on how it compares to what I've heard from launch, because I actually didn't play the Foglands at launch, so I don't have a direct comparison of my own experience with the launch version of this game, but I do have a fresh set of eyes to jump onto it now that all the fixes have been put in place, and it's been quite a few months since it's come out. So let's dive straight back in and tackle some of the biggest criticisms from when the game came out, now that it's been a couple months. First of all, I want to talk about the game as I found it overall. The visual presentation here is pretty damn good. It's fairly sharp, it's got a consistent art style, and although you do see repeat rooms because there are only a couple levels, they are fairly well thought out, and there's a lot of visual distinction between each of them. As you progress through each run, you'll encounter the same enemy types and the same layouts, but they do visually feel different from each other, but over a long course of time you will probably get sick of them. I think the worst thing about the visual presentation here is the lighting changes between these levels, because it's a lot like Green Hell VR in that you will progress from one part of a level to another and you'll get a really short fade in, fade out loading screen as the next section loads, and these sections aren't very big, so you'll be running into this a lot. You'll probably see it in the background footage of this video, and the lighting can change completely between each of these segments, which really threw me off in terms of how the game flows, and I feel like it does break up the flow a little too much. Although the game itself, I was thoroughly enjoying how it actually looked. The fog that coats all the levels, they're very worn down and lived in underground mines. They felt like they were real places, and I did enjoy exploring them. As I said, the levels are very, very similar in terms of how you go through them. You'll be going through the same areas a lot, but at least they do look good while you fight through them. Like any good roguelite like the Light Brigade or Synapse, you'll get upgrades as you go, and these are through essentially card unlocks that you choose, and they have a nice little animation that plays. I never really felt these doing too much helping in terms of work to aid me through the levels, but it is nice to have these upgrades, and some of them are fairly notable, but most of them I kind of just didn't mind what I picked. But it is nice that you have these in little breaks in terms of store items and card upgrades and stat upgrades as you go through the levels. There are little stages where NPCs will be hiding, where you can go and talk to them and buy stuff from them, and they're your basic roguelike vendor, but they do their job pretty well. One big complaint I heard when the game came out was that the picking up and using items was very, very rough. I still feel like this could use a bit of work, but it's nowhere near as bad as I heard it was at launch. In terms of actually picking up weapons and storing them, it still feels a little janky, but eye tracking is the way that you select what you want to pick up. So once you know that, it is fairly easy to do so. But slotting them in your holsters does feel a little janky because they kind of have a permanent place there, meaning you can drop your gun and then pick it out of the holster even though you haven't put it back in there. And also sometimes the inventory in terms of picking up a new magazine or cylinder for the revolver just didn't really function that well. However, this was incredibly rare, and for the most part this seems to have been improved a fair bit, and the physics for throwing items is also a lot of fun because you can properly launch them at enemies and across the map. They also fixed the movement issues because you've now got toggle sprint, which is very, very handy. It's no longer a chore to run around, and I was fine with traversal, and it feels fairly smooth to go about these maps and levels. Now, the NPC conversations that I heard a lot of complaints about at launch are pretty much the same. I mean, there are several moments when a new character got introduced or a previous character was giving me some exposition and I couldn't progress through a door because the door wouldn't open until they finished. So I was kind of just forced to stand there and wait until they had finished talking to then progress through the level. And the story here is fairly engaging. I actually was interested in where it was going and meeting these new people, but in my opinion, stopping and slowing down the gameplay like this wasn't quite the way to do it. So I still found these issues were a little bit annoying. In terms of the actual game-breaking bugs though that people reported, I haven't actually ran into any at all. It seems they fixed most of these, and as an experience, I'm a lot more comfortable recommending this to somebody who likes the look of the gameplay and the trailers, because it actually feels like that now. It feels like the game came out and it wasn't quite done, and hopefully on the next couple of months they can keep fixing it up and patching some more things, but it seems like a lot of it has been fixed, which is really good to see. The enemy variety here is decent. There's a couple of different enemy types, such as spiders, your normal mutants and ranged enemies, and a couple bosses for you to fight. But the AI isn't the smartest. They get stuck on stuff. Sometimes they'll just spin around a little bit and wait for you to kill them. And they also do take quite a lot of damage, even with upgrades that you get throughout the game. They're very bullet spongy, and the bullet projectile speed is still not very fast. So it's kind of hard to hit your targets sometimes if they're moving quite a lot. And you also can get a slow motion effect that is essentially, I think, a bit of a reward. Like in Swordsman, when you parry well, you get a bit of slow-mo. The same is here, but the slow-mo introduces some weird physics effects to your gun that basically make it impossible to aim. So it's more of a hindrance than a reward, so wasn't a fan of that. A couple final positive notes as well are the soundtrack is pretty amazing. I was vibing to it a lot, and the music seems to be adaptive whether you're in combat or not and what enemies you're facing. And the fact that the game can actually be played in flat screen. Now, I played a little bit in flat screen. I did a single run and it felt fairly janky compared to VR, but once you've had that sense of control through VR gameplay, it will feel janky to sit down and play it with a controller. For example, if I play through Pavlov in VR and then try to jump into the same levels on lobbies and guns with a controller on the flat screen, if it got translated that way, it would feel really, really unresponsive compared to the precision that you have with virtual reality controllers. So that's just a VR to flat thing. It's not really a fault of the devs here. But yeah, the way to play this game is on PSVR2, and I don't think I'd recommend it as a purely flat screen experience, but it does work in flat screen, which is pretty cool. Overall, the Foglands has seemingly had a lot of fixes. It feels like a more fleshed out game than I heard at launch, and it feels a lot more accurate to the trailers that I saw. While they still have a little ways to go, I feel like it's on the right track now, and if you're really wanting a VR game that has this sort of vibe in the roguelike loop, you'll probably get your money's worth and enjoy this one. If you're a little on the fence, definitely wait for a sale, but it's good to see developers stick with their product and furnish it into something that is quite enjoyable, because that's what the Foglands is. It is quite enjoyable. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you did enjoy. It's a busy week here on the channel, so uploads will continue at the same rate. Quite excited for the week to come. Thank you to our patron, Luke Bentley, and anyone who has considered subscribing to the memberships or Patreon. The link is in the description. Any donations and support help the channel keep going and keep me doing what I do and living, essentially. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you all in the next video.